Oh, hello there, and welcome to Phil Talking D20. So, today's video, bit of a clue, oh, it's the other way. Here is the Gunslinger. So, I covered the inventor first, and in that video, one of the reasons I said I covered the inventor first was because I felt it was generally a slightly more interesting kind of class. I like what they were doing with the weapon options, the armor options, the way you could have the companion that was like a slightly bumped up animal companion, and the fact that it had the immunities that a construct has. And generally, out of the two classes, it felt like the more interesting and engaging class. Now, normally, I'm quite positive, but the Gunslinger isn't very exciting. And it's not particularly brilliant either, in my opinion, mainly because I've played a 2E Ranger and taken crossbow ace and kind of built, um, ironically, a gunslinger before using Ranger and some hand crossbows, and homebrewed repeating crossbows because we've always had repeating crossbows. They're a common thing. They're in 1E. I'm pretty sure they're in 5th edition. I'd be surprised if they weren't in 5th edition. You know, a repeating crossbow is fairly normal for us. Truth be told, mildly surprised they didn't put a repeating crossbow in the playtest. They talked about advanced crossbows in the fluff that you see with the kind of in this bit. Trained in, here we go, attacks. Expert in simple firearms and crossbows. Expert in martial firearms and crossbows. Trained in advanced firearms and crossbows. You're not telling me that a repeating crossbow isn't an advanced crossbow. Obviously, this is a playtest. So all the way down at the bottom of this class, we have weapons. Flintlock musket, pistol, hand cannon, which isn't very cannony at all. Arquebus, blunderbuss, and dueling pistol are the ones they've dropped in to the playtest for us to muck about with. Now, if you take a duelist pistol, you'll only get a d6 damage. If you take a flintlock musket, you can get that up to a d8. But you're still better off playing a ranger with crossbow ace and a hand crossbow because you can get that up to a d8 really easily, and on a reload get +2 damage and blah blah blah. It's not bringing a lot to the table, this class, and I'm going to talk about why. It kind of starts to go. It sounds brilliant. Let's go right to this first little bit where you get excited and you go, "Oh my god, that's really cool." Because it says you're an expert in simple and martial firearms and crossbows. Expert proficiency. Okay, the fighter gets expert proficiency. We're going to get loads of combat feats, like the equivalent of power attack and those other useful kind of combat feats that we see fighter get and ranger get. Um, Except you don't. You really don't. Let me just quickly jump down here to the first of our kind of options. So the first thing we do after we've done the usual kind of kerfuffle of class creation is we pick a path. And you've got the way of the drifter, the way of the pistolero, and the way of the sniper. And we're not going to look at the later level ones because we're going to look at where we start at with each of them. So the drifter, you gain the acrobatic skill and you get into the fray. It's a free action based on you rolling initiative. Trouble can lurk around every corner. You can draw a ranged weapon and then also draw a one-handed melee weapon. So basically, free action, draw weapons. Uh, as a first action on your next turn, you can stride towards the enemy you can perceive as a free action. So there's lots of free actions going on here, and that's quite powerful. You're getting a free stride and you're getting free weapon draws. But it's situational, isn't it? And what I mean by that is if you're in a dungeon and you're travelling through a dungeon and you haven't got to an encounter yet, the chances are you've probably still made the statement, I'm going to have my weapons drawn, because you're probably going to be coming into a combat. There's going to be combat in your immediate surroundings, so you're not just going to travel without a weapon drawn. I can't be the only person who thinks maybe there's going to be trouble in this dungeon or this particular area where we know we're actively looking for trouble. Do you know what I mean? That plenty of times in a game, you know you're going looking for trouble. It makes sense to have your weapons drawn. So it sounds like it's giving you a lot until you realise you've probably already got weapons drawn. At those times when you don't, like I said, it is situational. Not having to burn an action drawing weapons is very good. So let's not play it down. That is definitely quite a useful boon, and a free move action on top. They're giving us quite a lot there. So that's the initial path or the initial deed of the Way of the Drifter. Oh, there's another one. Way of the Pistolero. We're getting deception or intimidation, and our initial deed is 10 paces. Oh, the trigger. We roll initiative. You react to trouble with lightning speed, positioning yourself just right. You gain a +2 bonus to your initiative roll, and you can interact to draw a crossbow or firearm or one-handed melee weapon as a free action. So we're still getting this free action to draw a weapon. Instead of 2 weapons though, it's for +2 on our initiative roll and only 1 weapon, and we're only getting 10-foot free move action in the next round. Like, they're very similar, but they're not different enough to have that rapid difference in why am I only getting 10 feet of speed here versus a full move action here. And it's like I get to draw 2 weapons and do a full move action, or I can do 1 free draw and a 10-foot action. Do you know what I mean? Like, they jar a little bit for me. I don't know why, but they're not wildly exciting. And then we go down here, Way of the Sniper. We get stealth as our bonus skill. We get 1 shot, 1 kill. You roll stealth for your initiative. Again, it's a free action. Your first shot is the deadliest. You interact to draw a firearm or crossbow. On your first turn of this encounter, the first strike you make with that weapon that hits deals an additional 1d6 precision damage. This increases to 2d6 at 9th and 3d6 at 15. Be a rogue. Be a rogue and use a bow, and operate within your first range increment and add your sneak attack. So it's not, do you know what I mean? Like, what this class seems to do is stuff that other classes already do, and it doesn't do it better than them. In fact, often it's not doing it very well at all. Waiting until 9th level to get 2d6 is brutal compared to rogue. And you've only got 8 hit points. It's not like you can say, oh, but, it's a tanky class because it's built for combat. It's only 8 hit points. 8 plus your con. So it just feels like it's always just too far off the curve to be really competitive. So let's just quickly jump to feats and early level feats, just so you can kind of see where I'm going with this. Gunslinger feats. First level, cover fire. Firearm ace, hit the dirt, and sword and pistol. Cover fire, you've got a loaded firearm or crossbow that you're wielding. You lay down suppressive fire. It's not really suppressive fire, it's 1 shot because you've got to reload after each shot because all the firearms reload 1. So I can't see it making someone really duck if you just fired 1 or maybe two shots at them, but just by the by. You lay down suppressive fire to protect your allies. You make a firearm or crossbow strike targeting the foe, who must decide whether to duck behind cover, no actions required, or not before you roll your attack, so they instantly get to take cover. If the target ducks, it gets a free action to take cover against you, gaining a +4 circumstance bonus to its AC from greater cover, but it also takes a -2 penalty to range attacks until the end of its next turn. This greater cover only applies against your strike, not to future attacks. If the target chooses not to duck, the strike functions normally. So you can basically reduce your ability to deal damage to it quite drastically with the old +4 there, just to put a -2 penalty on its ranged attacks, all for it using free actions. You're not forcing it to burn an action, but you are giving it a massive bonus to armor class against your attack roll for the cost of an action. Doesn't quite sound worth it, does it? Do you know what I mean? Like, why would I want to burn one of my actions to massively reduce my own ability to hit it and then put a small penalty on it? Like, I don't see what the reward is. There's plenty of other abilities where I can just do something, like in Fighter or in other classes, where I can do something where I'm using an action, and I can then put it at a penalty, but it's not a cost to me in the same way that this is. I'm not forcing him to burn one of his actions, which I feel you should. I don't know, that's a bit of an odd one. Firearm Ace is a bit like Crossbow Ace. When you reload, you add a +2 circumstance bonus to damage. If the firearm is simple, increase the damage die one size. So that's basically Crossbow Ace. Hit the dirt. A creature is basically a dodge bonus that you could get as a swashbuckler, except you end up prone. Now, what happens when you're prone? You have to use an action to get up from prone. So, whereas other classes can have a dodge ability that doesn't leave them having to burn an action to recover from, this class again is somehow penalised, requiring them to have to burn an action to do something that other classes don't suffer that penalty on. So again, that's an odd one, isn't it? Like, why is there this sudden like, oh right, yeah, well we'll just make them have to burn an action next turn, whereas plenty of other classes can gain a +2 circumstance bonus to their AC against a triggering attack without having to take this penalty where they're prone. Land prone after completing your leap. Harsh. They all seem a little bit harsh. They're all a bit takey away. Right, let's have a quick look at this one. Is this the one I'm thinking of? Sword and pistol. You're experienced at combining melee attacks with shots from a firearm, quickly adapting your range style to the current situation. When you make a successful range strike against an opponent within your melee reach using a firearm, okay, this is the flat-footed one. So if you use the ranged attack, your next melee attack against them treats them as flat-footed. So that's pretty reasonable, that one. Blast Lock. Here's another great example of something you probably wouldn't do. Bearing in mind you can use the Force Open action from Athletics, or have the Rogue use Thievery to pick the lock, or simply target and damage the lock as an object. So again, this one is one of those ones where you're like, do I really need to take it? Make your attack roll against the DC required to pick the lock. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I could already target the lock as an object with hardness and hit points. Why would I waste there's no way that a DM is going to be like, yeah, I know there's a padlock with 7 hit points on this gate, but you can't shoot it to blast it and do damage to it unless you've taken this feat. Oh, but don't worry, the fighter can just use his great athletics check to force open without needing a feat. Like, it's a bit, I'm not giving you anything, I'm penalising you by pretending to give you something, which again, there seems to be a lot of in this class. It's a bit weird. Here's another good example of something that's slightly weird. Pistol Twirl. This is important. Prerequisites. Trained in deception. Your quick gestures and performative flair, well, that's not deception, distract an opponent, leaving them vulnerable to your attack. You feint against an opponent within the required weapon's first range increment, rather than an opponent within melee reach. On a critical success or a success or critical success, they're flat-footed against your melee and ranged rather than your melee attacks. So they kind of they tied it only to deception, whereas I think there is an element of what about keying that to a couple of skills, um, and it's basically ranged feint, isn't it? So that's where that one's at. Um, Black powder boost is basically well, look, adding 10 feet of either horizontal or vertical distance you travel. Um, So it's kind of a reaction when you leap. You can fire a gun to get a bonus to it. That's a bit, again, it's a bit kind of like, it's a bit weird. Running reload, you can reload your weapon on the move. You stride, step, or sneak, and as part of that action, you can also reload a weapon. That's got some good utility to it. Quick draw. Quick draw sounds great, doesn't it? Oh, brilliant! Quick draw. That's a really useful feat. Except what happened up here with all of our initial ways, if you like, our pathways, these deeds, two of the major deeds already give us quick draw. They give it us as part of our initiative roll. So it's then like, is it really that important to have it as a second level feat? Some people could quite easily pick that feat and suddenly realise they've doubled down on something and don't necessarily need it. So that's a bit of an odd one as well. I think you'd probably be better off just giving that as a free level one feat and maybe retuning and making the initial deeds more interesting rather than pretty much the same, and then having quick draw as an option. It seems a bit better. Risky reload. You can reload and shoot as one action. Yeah, that's got some utility to it. Until you realise that if the strike fails, it's a misfire for your weapon, which obviously causes problems. Um, Cauterize is quite useful. It enables you to end the bleed condition, so that adds an interesting bit of utility. If you've shot the gun, you use the heated barrel to kind of sear the wound shut, so you can use that or someone within reach. So that's got a good bit of utility. Cauterize, quite like that one. But I don't know if you've noticed, I'm not talking about any damage feats. I'm not ignoring them. I'm not missing them. I'm not being like, oh, I'm only going to show you some of the like slightly hair beats and deliberately being negative. I've deliberately got the PDF here so you can kind of see where I'm pointing and what I'm looking at. Like, where's my DPM? You know, the class, when you look at that initial front page and you see that there is expert proficiency, I was really expecting to have a greater focus on damage output from this class, especially when you look at guns and you're like, so my dueling pistol is a d6 damage. Okay, what am I going to do with that? Especially when you realise that that is not a simple weapon, so won't buff its damage. And then it's like, well, just take a musket pistol, so you at least can get a d8 pistol. So why would you ever take a dueling pistol? And that's only if you take firearm ace, and that is the only one that's kind of really doing anything for you on the damage stakes side of things at kind of these low kind of mid-tier levels, like warning shot. You can essentially use the demoralize action by firing your firearm, or you could take a skill feat and negate the requirement for them to share a language with you by just staring at them. So it's like waste a whole class feat on a skill feat. Maybe I won't. It's an odd one, isn't it? It's definitely an odd one. Pistolero's challenge. So we're kind of into these ones where we're starting to add to look, where the sniper, where the drifter, and where the pistolero. these are kind of your specific, right, I've got to level 6, I can now add something to build upon my class kind of deed path that I chose. If I don't do that, I'm looking at either reloading strike or scatterblast. So there's not a huge amount of choice there, but it's not the point. You know, because look, Pistol Heroes Challenge, you're focusing on your core ability, or ending the bleed condition would be utility. Do you know what I mean? It's like, again, it's one of these things where it's noticeable that there is an odd combination until you read Pistol Heroes Challenge, where if you've chosen that path and you're excited, you think, oh, this is going to do something cool. So, Pistol Heroes Challenge. It's one action to issue the challenge, effectively. They are an opponent within 30 feet of you, can perceive and hear you, and make your choice of a deception or intimidation check. No matter the result of the check, the foe is temporarily immune to your Pistol Heroes challenge. You can only have one challenging effect at a time, where challenging a new foe ends the effect of the current target. It lasts until one of you is defeated or flees. Let's have a look. Success. Both you and the opponent +2 status bonus to damage rolls. So you get to buff your opponent to help them kill you, in the hope that your buff and your damage will be better. But if you miss some of your shots in a round and they don't, they're still buffing to kill you, and you're not buffing to kill them. Do you know what I mean? Now, God help you if you're critical. If you're on, look, so here you go. If you're a master in the skill you used, the status increases to 3, and if you're legendary, it increases to 4. So you buff someone, and you help them do damage to you in the hope that you will out DPN them versus them DPNing you, except if you're still stuck at level 6 with just a dueling pistol, and they're hitting you with a greatsword doing a d12, you're doing a d6 plus 3 if you've got, like, well, just say 2, let's just say 2, because, you know, we're sticking to the base numbers. But they're doing a d12 plus 4 plus 2. So who's going to win? Do you know what I mean? Like, that, again, is really punishing. And you aren't competing at DPM Town with the pistols in this book. And one of the things that's really surprised me about this, more so, is the Gunslinger and the Inventor already are in the core rulebook that we all own for Pathfinder 2e. You just go to oh, I've got one of these stupid sidebars. There we go. And you go to the rogue. You don't go to the rogue at all, do you, Mini? You go to the bit about the Age of Lost Omens, and you go to the Impossible Lands. I have done a video on the Impossible Lands. Feel free to check it out. Only in the Duchy of Alkenstar does life approach anything approximating normal, but even here the assumption of the rest of the world are turned on their head. With magic being unpredictable, Alkenstar's citizens have turned instead to technology. The nation is home to metallurgists and machinists, and the art of gunsmithing gives them an excellent advantage in this part of the world. Exports of firearms have steadily increased over the years, and Alkenstar is emerging as a significant power of its own as a result. Now, they kind of touch on, look, between the two opposed nations lies a stretch of land known as the Manaways, the blasted, blighted badland formed by ancient wars between Nex and Gev. The very magic of these lands is damaged, or in many reaches dead entirely. Now, I expected, especially with this flavour text in the core rulebook, very, very heavily suggesting that the core idea behind guns and inventors was they were themed around an area where there wasn't magic, that would justify firearms having much higher damage because you couldn't put or use striking runes and magical runes on them because the area has huge problems with magic. So the people of those lands weren't able to use magic to increase their offensive capabilities like other normal parts of Galarian can. And so I was expecting there to be this thing where the Gunslinger comes out of the gates with a 2d6 pistol. but he can't ever use magic, and he can only use his class feats and features to improve and increase his kind of abilities with, um, the save or be stunned, the save or be blind, the save or be dead stack of kind of abilities that might come in, or alchemical bullets that enable him to shoot poisons and have, here's my base damage, make me a fortitude save. Now you have to take kind of poison damage, or alchemical bomb kind of bullets that do fire damage on top of the character's base damage. And they kind of talked about, they've kind of looked at this. So I don't think I've not spotted it or seen it. It's just, here you go, look, we're already kind of here. Look, alchemical shot. You have an addition. You have an alchemical bomb worn or in one hand and are wielding a loaded firearm. So we're now having to buy bombs. You've practiced. Are we an alchemist? No. So we have to physically buy them. You've practiced the technique for mixing alchemical bombs with your loaded shot. You interact to retrieve the bomb. So this is two actions. We're already using a lot of our action economy. You pour it onto your ammunition, then strike with your weapon. The strike deals damage of the same type as the bomb. So alchemist fire means your damage is now doing fire damage, and it deals an additional 1d6 persistent damage of the same type as the bomb. Cool. Okay, we're still having to burn a lot of our money on bombs just to get some extra damage, and guess what? We're being punished again. The same type of bomb you used, where is it? Here you go, look. If the strike fails, just fails, not critically fails, you take 1d6 of the same type as the bomb you used, and the firearm misfires. But, like, that's a critical fail. That's not, that's really harsh. Really harsh. So we're using two actions and a whole lot of cash money to have constantly got bombs on us just to try and get a miserly little bit of extra damage. And if we just miss, we again take damage. Like, why am I not just having at 4th level alchemical bullets? And now I make special alchemical bullets with a craft check and downtime, and I can have an extra D4 damage. It's not a lot, but also I'm not being horribly penalised by killing myself if I just miss a target. If let's stack it up. We've taken alchemical shot, and then we've taken Pistolero's challenge, and we can really, really help our opponent kill us by giving them a damage buff and then missing them and dealing extra damage to ourselves just from missing, not critically missing. Madness. What were they thinking? That is very odd, isn't it? Very odd. We get up to level 8, and I mean, shooter's aim. 2 actions. You take an extra moment to carefully align your aim. You get +2 circumstance bonus to hit. Whoopie-doo. If I just simply take high ground, as in I use a move action to get up above them, I get a free +1 to hit circumstance bonus because I've got high ground as a bonus. So I can already get one action to get a +1, but that's by the by. I ignore the target's concealment. If you're using a firearm with the unsteady trait, you don't take the normal circumstance penalty for firing without using the tripod or the interact action on the strike, which is referring back to one of the big clunky rifle that you need to steady with one action before you can not take -2 penalties on your attack rolls anyway. Kind of like the longbow when it's in volley range, and if they're too close to you, take that penalty without using fighter feat picks to negate that penalty by using a stance. So are you kind of getting the kind of the thing? You can build better ranged, significantly better ranged combatants that can also easily out DPM the Gunslinger by using other classes. And yeah, you might not get the free actions when you roll initiative to draw your weapons, but if you're a switched on player and you're going into an environment where you're looking for trouble, you've probably already got your short bow drawn, well, you've probably already got your crossbow drawn and loaded because you're going looking for trouble in a tomb where you're pretty sure there's monsters because that's kind of what happens, isn't it? That's what happens in the game. So it's definitely an odd one. And still, I don't know about you guys, I'm not deliberately avoiding these pits. I'm not seeing anything that's giving me a whole lot of damage here. That's not giving me any extra damage, is it? I mean, with this level 8, I've dragged myself to level 8 just to get +2 on an attack roll. Again, I can get these kind of things from Ranger. I'm pretty even sure I get them earlier as a Ranger. So it feels a bit. Look, Smoke Curtain. Here's another good example of one that's kind of punishing you. It's like, well, I'm giving you something. You load an extra dose of black powder into your shot. Awesome. My shot's going to have more range and do more damage. Cool, because that's black powder, which is a propellant that's causing the bullet to come out and travel at higher velocities. Except it's making a big cloud of roiling smoke. So you make a strike. This is 2 actions to make a strike and make a 20-foot cloud of smoke around me as the gunslinger. Creatures are concealed while within the smoke, and creatures outside of the area are concealed to creatures within the smoke. So now what happens is my character suddenly penalises everyone with mischances in the party at the thing we're trying to attack that's kind of outside of the bubble. But it only lasts 1 round. If you critically fail, it misfires. Is that really useful? It doesn't feel like it. Certainly doesn't feel like a level 8 ability. Oh, I can put a flat check of, what's that, 5? Is that a flat check of 5 concealed? Yeah, hidden is 10. So I can put a really tiny misfire chance on everybody for 1 round. That isn't punishing my opponents. I'm not putting my opponents at a disadvantage. I'm putting everyone at a slight disadvantage for 2 of my actions, including me and my allies. Again, it doesn't feel like it's worth it. It's like, and then we finally, we've got to level 10. Maybe out here there's some damage. Out here maybe there is, no, there isn't. Well, there is a little bit. Trick shot. But we've had to get to level 10. It's exhausting. All this way. How many of us are going to get this far? It takes some time to get to level 10. It's not like you get there quickly. Deflecting shot. Trigger an ally within your first range agreement of your firearm or crossbow is hit by an attack, and you can see the attacker. You give them a +2 to their armor class. Redirecting shot. If they miss, you can try and put the shot back on track. But we've had to kind of claw ourselves for a whole lot of, and these still aren't giving us like they're still not giving us bonus damage. We're still not seeing like a power attack. When you think about a melee fighter, adding an extra uses 2 actions and does 2 attacks combined, and then totals the damage up to bypass damage reduction. And yeah, they shouldn't have, and this is again in their defense, they shouldn't have copy pasted, although they have done, haven't they? Let's be clear. There is a couple in here that are just copy pasted out of Ranger. But it shouldn't have been a case of, oh, well, we'll just rinse and repeat what other classes have done. They should have gone, all right, well, how are we going to get some more damage into this class? How are we going to get some flavour into this class? And some of them, by themselves, if you were just being kind of maybe even just given them, would be quite cool and quite fun. There's just not enough of these feats in the Gunslinger that are worth taking. It's great to have some utility feats for flavour and usefulness, but when there's already much better options available just by using either skills or skill feats or letting other classes that you're probably going to be adventuring with just use things they can do without burning feats. Blastlock is a great example of that. There's going to be someone who could do that job and you're irrelevant. So don't take it, because if you haven't got someone with a good athletics check, you've probably got someone who can pick a lock. Or you've got someone with a knock spell, or do you know what I mean? You're the last person to need that, and especially as you're having to burn a feat, it just, yeah, it's not particularly well optimized as a class. I think there needs to be a bigger focus on maybe certainly reworking a lot of these feats to make them less punitive. I don't want to have to take something that is going to constantly backfire on me, even if I've not critically failed. I don't want to be taking things that are massively increasing my opponent's chances of killing me at the hope that I can have a slight buff to damaging them. Because, like I said, that they're getting that bonus damage. If I'm using a pistol or a gun and they're using a greatsword, the advantage I'm giving them is huge versus the advantage I've given myself. Um, and then I think guns, they need to really buff the damage here, but just say they're magically dead. Like, because at the moment, you are far more effective with a longbow or a short bow than you are with these firearms. And the only reason these are even vaguely useful is because they haven't introduced repeating crossbows. Worst case scenario, for these rules here, in my homebrew, I added repeater crossbows because I thought, isn't this weird? We haven't got repeater crossbows. They've been in Pathfinder and D&D for years. Where have they gone? So I just added them in. I made them about 40 gold, mainly because if you look at the price drop in the core rulebook of Pathfinder 2 versus Pathfinder 1, for the price drop that we've seen on crossbow versus crossbow, the price drop that 2E gave it versus how much they cost in Pathfinder 1, because they were quite expensive in Pathfinder 1 crossbows. I can't remember precisely, but I remember looking. We're at a situation where I then just applied the same kind of reduction that I calculated to repeating crossbows and rounded up a little bit. So I think it ended up about 40 gold or 50 gold. Still, that's probably a level 3 item, a repeater crossbow, if we're going to be really nerdy about the mechanics of 2E. But once you have a repeating crossbow and a ranger who takes crossbow ace and all the other yada blah blah kind of feat options that he's got, or you take a rogue and you take the path that enables you to use ranged weaponry with your sneak attack, you are much powerful. Or even a fighter who takes crossbows and specializes in crossbows, you can be much more destructive. And yeah, combat isn't the only thing in a role playing game, but you don't play a gunslinger to not be like competent and capable and focused on shooting people and doing damage. And you ain't going to be doing that, even when you start to get runes. Because, again, like I said, you're not, ironically, the dueling pistol is kind of null and void, don't bother with it. The flintlock musket, because it's simple, enables you to bump it up to a D8, is already better. The dueling pistol is only 30-foot range, whereas the flintlock pistol is 20 foot, it's 10 foot, you can live with that. It's only 10 feet. Sorry, look, 1d4, so you get up to 1d6. But this is what I'm saying, it's kind of this weird kind of, anathema balance where you're being really held back on your damage. And I really, I don't know where they need to focus their efforts, but this one needs some work. Inventor is good. Inventor's got a lot of cool stuff in it. It's much more interesting. It's much more engaging. Um, there are some niggles, and they're not major. That but overall, it's a much cooler, more engaging class, and much worthier of being included in the game. Whereas at the moment, the Gunslinger really falls off a cliff hard. Um, because even at level 1 you can build a much better combatant out of Inventor than you can out of Gunslinger, which is really surprising. I mean, look at this, look, Explosive Leap, level 1 feat, I can leap 30 feet, unstable, which means I can only do it once a combat. Whereas if we go up to doing a like-for-like comparison directly on Gunslinger, that wasn't level 1, but it was a low-level feat. Is it level 2? Or was it level 4? Yeah, it's level 4. Great, here we go, level 4. You're wielding a load of firearm. You leap, sounding familiar already, adding 10 feet. So I can leap 30 feet at level 1, or I can get to level 4 and add an extra 10 feet to a leap. See what I'm saying? It needs a lot of love, Gunslinger. It does not need the love it had in Pathfinder 1. So, you know, the Pathfinder 1 Gunslinger was monstrous. Oh, I shoot everything at touch AC. I never miss. And the rest of the party need not be here because, oh, I rolled a 12 to hit against the really powerful monster that's got an armor class of 37 for everybody else. Yeah, touch AC, hit. Do you know what I mean? It was horrible, wasn't it? Horrible, nightmare, sweaty class where the DMs would wake up going, oh, don't play Gunslinger. Whereas this, they've gone too far the other way, you know, which is a shame. I think there was a much better place for this class. If we even needed it, you know, maybe we don't need Gunslinger. Maybe this class is only an archetype. Maybe that's all it is. And that's why it feels this kind of hodgepodgey. But yeah, so it's a shame, isn't it? It's a shame, genuinely a shame. I think that there is potential here. I just think it needs a lot more focus and a lot more love to get it kind of geared up and being cool. I'm not entirely sure the actual honest, and it's not my job, so I don't really have to. Woohoo! I can just criticise. Oh, what a wonderful job you've got, Phil, criticising the internet. Sat in your ivory throne, your ivory tower. You know, this isn't meant as a diss video. The guy who has put a huge amount of work into this has done really well at taking on a really hard task, which is how on earth can you make something that doesn't break the world? Because one thing you hear a lot is, oh, but guns are really powerful, and if you shoot someone with a gun, they would die. And it's like, okay, tell that to the guy with a great sword and tell him that he can't kill as effectively. It's like, yes, guns are powerful, and they should be powerful, but they shouldn't be insanely powerful. But I think they need a bit of love. You know, the reload, I think, is something they could look at. And I think that's something that would be a consideration. Maybe we up the reloads and drop the reloads and use that as a factor of balance. You know, I don't see there being any harm in a bigger damage dice or even multiple damage dice weaponry with hard locks and limitations on what you can do with them, because the reality is things like flintlocks, they're multi-action weapons to reload, so maybe they need to address what weapons they've chosen. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot to consider, because a flintlock, you've got to, you know, the wadding and powder and ball go down the barrel, and then you cock back the hammer, the striking hammer, which is either flint or whip based. Obviously, it's a flintlock, so this is flint. Um, you then have to prep the spark chamber with powder, which connects into the area where the wadding and black powder and ball are in the barrel, and then cock that lever forward over that tray so that when you pull the trigger and release the flint lock, it will hit the strike plate, which will ignite the little bit of black powder on the outside, which will then travel through into the chamber, detonate, and fire the bullet out. That's not a one action reload. If you're very good, you could do it quickly, and I think maybe there is an instant feat option for 4th or 6th level where you can quick reload and bring your reload action count down by 1 or 2 if you choose it again at level 9 or 10. Do you know what I mean? I can see a lot of pathways where they could make something much more engaging. So I think buffing weapon damage, but focusing on the fact that they are clunky compared to bows, because from a historical perspective, there is a long transition period where the Battle of Agincourt, famous Battle of Agincourt, where um, obviously Henry defeated a numerically superior French force, um, consisting of a great deal of knights by using terrain and blah 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 blah. Go read and watch Agincourt. Brilliant story, historically true, obviously not story. Um, but at the Battle of Agincourt, the first gun was used. It was totally rubbish and massively ineffective compared to the now state of the art at the time longbow, which the British had focused on and trained and developed and pushed to its nth degree in terms of bow technology. The ancient Greeks had crossbows. The Romans had composite bows and crossbows. It's not like bows were a thing for a little while. Bow technology was extensive and a huge period of time. And then you move forward into the Middle Ages, and there's still bows, but guns start to become the mainstay. The British Civil War is where you start seeing large amounts of firearm use. And then obviously the American War for Independence, where you start to see rifling versus musket, where there is a huge jump in accuracy. And fair play to the Americans, you nailed it with rifling. We use rifling as well as the British. Let's not pretend that the Americans invented everything. Um, but rifling was the next jump for firearms. But the reality is that a bow and a firearm, like a musket, you should try and find a balance that justifies why maybe a weapon like a musket can do more damage but have a longer reload cycle. And then the power that the gunslinger brings to those weapons that, if you're a novice user of, are worse than a bow, but then once you become very proficient in them, they become better than a bow. Maybe that's an idea. I'm spitballing now. It needs some love, and it needs some refinement, and that's kind of my thoughts on it. It definitely needs some attention, because certainly for a huge chunk of low levels, you really don't feel like you're getting anywhere, and you're really stuck with a really limited DPM potential, where you could do a much better job with other classes like Ranger or Rogue or Fighter. And I think that's a shame. This deserves its own limelight spot with weaponry. Um, and if they're not going to do a lot with it, don't put it in. Just make it an archetype and give us another class, because this needs a lot of work to make it interesting. Like this alchemical shot, spending a lot of money on bombs. Why am I spending a lot of money on bombs when I'm a gunslinger? Like, make my gun better. Let me make cool alchemical bullets that add damage effects, and I'm not having to burn lots of actions. I can now just take this feat, and it doesn't cost me any actions. I just have to use crafting to make these new kind of bullets, and now my gun does an extra d4 damage every time I shoot it on every attack. But maybe increase my misfire chance. Um, give me a repeating pistol. Maybe that's the thing. Maybe we need the gunslinger to only have access to repeating crossbows and pistols, and that other people would have to spend feats on to get into, even the ranger, even the fighter. That would be an idea. But right now, as it's presented in this playtest, gunslinger needs some love. And I'm sure it's going to get it, because I'm sure there'll be a lot of feedback, probably in line with me. Um, Not because I'm right, but because those flaws feel obvious, and I think they need addressing. So there you are, the gunslinger, not as cool as he should be, and that's me. I'm not, I'm normally someone who very much doesn't advocate min maxing. I'm very much against it, but this class genuinely feels underpowered. Like, genuinely, having played a ranger who focused on being cool with crossbows, and again, home brewing, so there is a caveat there, and having repeater crossbows in my world, which they've been in Galorian because of Pathfinder 1 being in Galorian, you know, they are a thing. They're not suddenly removed from history because we're in 2E, massively more competent and more capable than this gunslinger can be, and that's a shame. And in a way, maybe that's good because maybe we don't see this class erode Ranger, um, but it still should have its own place in the game. Gunslinger needs some love, so hopefully we see a revision or some good like articles talking about where they're going to address changes. I think that would be cool to see, especially for the previous playtest with Magus and Summoner. That would be cool as well. See if we can have like a kind of a this is kind of an idea of where we're going to move with it now. That would be cool to hear from the guys. Really, really good luck to you kind of tweaking this class, guys. I can't remember who the author is. Come on, can we find the author so we can give him some love and I can apologise to him directly, having been rather mean to him for some time. Design team. Oh well, look, if you're watching this and you designed a gunslinger, feel free to leave me a comment saying I'm a big fat butthead and you hate me. Alternatively, if you want to like send me an email and be like, yeah, well, if you do such a better job, why don't you get a few ass and design it? I'd love to have a chat because there is some great potential in here. I just think it needs a bit of love, and we can make that work. And as a community with all our feedback, you're going to get all the tools you need to do that. So, best of luck, enjoy it, and stay classy, stay sassy, and I will see you on the next video. Peace out.